as a baseline, like having that as a you have the tool set to endure more than most. Some people are just not capable of handling any real adversity. Anything bad that comes down the pipe for them, they just fall apart. And I think for many people, there's a real extreme feeling of a lack of purpose in life. There's an extreme feeling of a lack of meaning, that nothing they do matters, that they don't matter, that no one cares about them, whether they're there or they're gone. People either mock them or disregard them altogether, and they want people to know who they are, and that's one of the reasons why they do these things.
I can see that for sure, but again, if I'm being objectively honest about myself, I did have those tools, and probably the only thing that prevented me from acting out in that moment is that I didn't have access to the individuals that I wanted to act out against. And I mean, it's like I said, I understand it. I don't have a solution for it at all, but I understand it.
Yeah, well, you would be able to understand it more than most, in coming from that place of having lost friends and being in that intense, and also being in this environment where people are shooting and killing people on a regular basis, and you're directly a part of that and directly connected to it. It makes violence so much more tangible.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I don't want to paint a horrible picture. There's a ton of misconceptions about what I used to do, right? And it comes from books and movies and TV shows, because in 60 Minutes, all that happens is bullets whizzing by your head and shit blowing up. The reality is you're not exposed to violence that often overseas. You are over a long term, I guess, in the aggregate, but it's not as bad as people. It's not as bad as people, I think, often would maybe want to romanticize it as being bad, because then they can maybe excuse away behaviors that come from that.
Does that bother you about movies, when you see movies about...
God. You should... If my wife was here, all you'd have to say is, do you enjoy watching a war movie with your husband? She's like, oh my God. She just said, get out of the room. Get out of the room, because I can't do it. Like, it drives me nuts, but it also sets bad expectations. I mean, I had some of the best times of my life overseas as well. And it wasn't all about loss, and it certainly wasn't all about loss of life. There'd be whirlwind periods of time where that happened. And there'd be other periods of time where we're just training people, or we're going out and actually meeting leaders in the city and having meals with them. And then, yeah, that night you might get your stuff on and go banging for a night. But at the same time, it's a mix of all of those things. I'm grateful for the experiences that I have from my military service. Probably the best day of my life was the day I got shot. It changed my perspective of who I thought I was. It forced me to lift my head up and think about the future more than just the job that I had, because my ability to do my job was thrown into my face. I thought I was, once I realized I wasn't going to die, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do the job I've always wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I started thinking about the future. Again, I would not be sitting here talking to you today if I hadn't have been shot. And when it happened in that moment, it was the worst day of my life. And I look back on it, it probably was maybe it wasn't the best day of my life, but perhaps one of the most meaningful changes in direction for me as a human being. So there is positive that comes out of that negative. It's not all bad. I think I got more positive, more good than bad from 15 years at war.
It's interesting that does happen, right? That some bad moment in your life could lead to a greater life overall.
Yeah, complete shift in perspective. I had never thought about anything in my life except an unsatiable desire to be a SEAL. And then I became a SEAL. I'm like, this is awesome, because it was pre-9/11. So we just worked out, drank, and then worked out and drank. And then 9/11 happened, and my world went from conceptual to practical. And it was way different than I thought it was going to be, because I'd watched the same movies.
Right.
And then you get over there and you're like, oh, whoa, this is substantially different. And it built, and it was a lot of the things that I thought it wasn't going to be, and even more than I thought it possibly could be in some of those directions. But I don't know. People, I think, often paint war or the experiences associated with war as solely negative. I also, just like when it comes to the conversations of being on the extremes, I would love to pull that more back into the middle and actually have a conversation about it. I think amazing changes can come from people in those environments.
What is it about war movies that drive you the most crazy?
The fact that almost everything in them is inaccurate.
Almost everything?
The biggest thing that drives me fucking crazy is when grenades create a fireball.
Really?
Well, yeah, because it happens in like every movie. They throw a grenade and a 55-gallon drum of gasoline explodes.
Right.
And people go flying backwards and cars flip over. If you throw a grenade, it goes pop, and it puts some dust up in the air. And if you're waiting for the fireball, you're going to be there for the rest of your natural life. It's just not going. And they're not that effective. They're fun, don't get me wrong, but they're not that effective.
I did not know that they don't create a fireball.
No.
I've never seen a grenade go off, obviously.
I'm sure Jamie can pull one up. It just goes, pff, it's dust. Is all it is.
I think I've seen one in a video of them.
I'm sure for a moment, like the momentary explosion, there's a flash. But other than that, it's literally just dust flying up in the air.
What is the best military movie that's the most accurate or the least offensive?
Navy SEALs starring Charlie Sheen.
Really?
No, not at all.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I almost fell down.
That fucking guy probably fooled more people into coming into the SEAL teams than anybody else.
Really?
Oh my God.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, he's falling through skylights with MP5s and handlebar mustaches. You know, there's snipers calling himself God. I can't see anything. I'm switching to Starlight, blasting people through a concrete wall. They're doing free fall jumps. They're in submarines. Like, that's an entire 30-year career to do all that shit in 60 minutes. Like, you take that expectation, you come to the teams, you're like, God, I'm kind of bored right now.
So is that the war area? Is
There
Charlie
it is.
Sheen.
Get
Bang,
it.
bang, bang, bang. Look at him. I'm going to run, boys.
Yep.
I'm gonna make it. And he's got the requisite scarf around the neck.
And
You
first
have to
off,
have one of those.
so what kind of asshole wears a red scarf in an environment where there's no red?
Yeah,
He's got
that's
green utilities on from Vietnam,
Yeah,
wearing a
what?
red
Look at that guy.
chamal. Yeah.
This is so hilarious.
So another one that-
especially when you know Charlie now, like such a
Oh, God.
fucking psychotic partier, and
So apparently, so they came to the Bud compound and did a little bit of training with the guys, and I guess there was some bathroom breaks, and they just like, all right, you guys ready for some more PT?
oh really? That makes sense.
I'm obviously hearing that 18th hand, but I want to believe it's true.
Well, you know who I hear trains diligently and really hard, and like takes it super seriously, and is like one of the most humble guys you ever meet is Keanu Reeves.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me either. But I heard some people that have had interacted with him when he was training for
John Wick?
yeah, including my jiu-jitsu instructor, John Jock Machado, my
Yeah.
friend Higa Machado, John Jock's brother, and a bunch of other. He worked out with a bunch of the Machados, in fact. I think Carlos as well. But you know, he really wanted to learn actual jiu-jitsu, so he really did
shooting.
train with them. Yeah, he did real tactical courses and.
And so his tactical proficiency shows in that movie. And so to get back to stuff that bothers me, it's the 72-round pistol magazine. Because I'm counting, I'm like, that's 15, 25, 30. Or the shotgun that has 48 rounds in it. So like, I can't do it. I'm like throwing stuff at the TV. My wife just points. She says, get out. Like, I can't do it. Like, so Sicario, I love Sicario. There's a scene at the border that has one of the most blatant just errors in the movie. There's a guy pointing a gun. He's supposedly a CIA agent. He's pointing a gun out the windshield, and you can see that the bolt to the rifle is locked to the rear,
Oh no!
which means the armor on set handed it to him, clear and safe, and he just went and they filmed it and nobody caught it. And I saw that movie. I'm like, turn that shit off. I can't watch it anymore.
Of course, yeah.
It ruins it for me.
Now, why don't they fix stuff like that? You would think that you're making a movie about military or about guns. Like,
Yeah.
the
They didn't catch
real
it.
gun nuts are going to notice that.
But they probably didn't catch it in the editing process. It's so fast. It's probably up there for 3 seconds. But if you know, I mean, you look at a gun and like you just if it was your primary tool for years, you're looking for certain things all the
There
time.
it
Yep,
is.
here we go.
Look, for someone who doesn't know, that looks super serious.
Well, that's why they're still watching the movie and I left.
Yeah.
Yep, bolt to the rear.
Ah!
See
There it
that?
is. Yep.
Walk to the rear.
Yep.
Go ahead and pull the trigger there.
Go ahead, son. That shit ain't.
Obviously an empty magazine.
Yeah. Hey, silly.
Yeah. So nobody caught that in the editing process is
How
what
the
it
fuck
is.
did they not see that? No, don't you think they digitally could have moved that forward?
They 100% could move it because he didn't
Yeah.
fire in that scene anyway.
Yeah, just push that bitch up. Just Photoshop that sucker.
I gotta get
I mean, they
anxiety
can
watching
use.
this.
You get angry, right? That makes sense. Hey, man, in a way less significant thing, I get crazy when I watch people play pool in movies that obviously can't play.
Oh, I can only
Drives
imagine.
me nuts.
Yes.
Drives me nuts. Like if I see someone like supposed to be some pool hustler, and I see they have a bullshit bridge and they're gripping the like you can see things in movies like my friends who smoke cigarettes say they can tell when someone doesn't smoke.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because when you smoke, there's just like a casual, relaxed way that you're holding the cigarette and the way you're drawing it. But when someone's like, never smoked before, and they're like,
Yeah.
they've got this weird thing they're doing. Like, oh, that guy doesn't really smoke. I'm like, how the fuck can you tell it? Because I smoke.
It's like another thing that bugs me is you watch any tactical scene where they're like moving down a hallway and it's like, why is your gun pointed at your buddy's face? Like, that's not cool.
Yes,
Why are you aiming across? Like, and then the way that they make entry into rooms, it's like awesome. I like to play Russian roulette with my life as well. Like, it just drives me absolutely.
What about
nuts.
Zero Dark 30?
That movie? Fucking sucks.
What sucks about it? You know what drove me crazy? That
How much
lady,
time do we have?
that redhead lady was yelling at all those trained killers. I was like, I don't think they'd listen to her.
There are some creative liberties that are taken in that movie from soup to nuts. I mean,
Like, was that person the lady who yelled at those guys? The woman who was in charge. Was that a real human in real life?
it was based off of a real human for sure. Like a lot of the things in that movie were based on real events. However, if you're trying to get tickets to get people seats, their butts in seats, you got to glamorize stuff.
Right.
So a lot of people, because in that movie, the source drives up in the vehicle and detonates himself. That
Yeah.
actually happened. That killed a bunch of people in Kaust. If as long as you look at it as entertainment, that movie's okay. If you look at it with a refined eye, like, are they doing this correctly? No. They're all going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we would need another 4 hours to literally go down the list of things, but it's just things are compressed. Things that would never happen for the sake of creating an intoxicating or emotional scene on camera, and it's tough to watch because I'm sitting there, I'm like, get out of the door, get out of the door, get out of the door. I'm getting anxiety watching these damn movies because you don't hang out in front of open doors unless you want to get shot.
Now, how many different things were fucked up about that movie?
Only the things that were after the opening scene.
So the whole movie is a disaster?
Yeah, it's just, I don't want to talk about it
To
anymore.
a dumbass like myself, I'm like, that's a good fucking movie. Seems pretty realistic.
Well, think about it from entertainment. It's
Yeah.
a great entertaining movie.
Right.
You could ask the same question about the movie American Sniper or Lone Survivor. They're all based around certain things that have been enhanced to make it more entertaining.
Yes.
And I get it. They're there to make money. They're not there to tell historically accurate.
Do you know
tale.
Marcus?
I do not know Marcus well, but I do know Marcus.
I know him. I don't know how he felt. I don't know if you'd ever say.
He was
how
involved with
felt
the making
about
of
the
it.
movie. Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure they only listened to him so much, you know?
Yeah. Given how again, having not been there, and I can only imagine how horrific that incident must be for him to deal with on a daily level, I would bet he wasn't very involved. I would almost rather them, if that was me, I think I would almost rather say, you know what, just make the movie that you want to make. Because I don't want to sit here and explain exactly what happened and recreate these scenes and talk about how this person died over here. Like, I would just go,
Yeah.
go to town.
Is there any movie that you've ever seen about war where you go, that makes sense?
First 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Not for accuracy, for capturing the essence of what it feels like. And the switch between utter fear to excitement to joy to anger in the matter of a second. Another movie that does a good aspect or a good job of capturing some of those aspects, I would say, is also Black Hawk Down. Not for accuracy, but to capture the chaos of how a plan can come unraveled and how chaotic it can be, and how sometimes you can feel so helpless, but your only solution is to drive into the problem instead of moving away from it. So those capture the essence of it well. From a technical perspective, I honestly cannot think of a single movie that does it justice.
Wow.
It would have to be like a 50-hour movie, though, because,
Of course.
I mean, Black Hawk Down, I think, was a multiple-day incident, and that movie's 90 minutes.
Right.
So they get rid of all the boring BS stuff that is actually what you do the vast majority of your job. If I look at my career, probably greater than 95% of my career I spent training, and 5% I spent in combat.
Really?
Yeah, and that's average. I would say there are people who are maybe a little bit higher and people who are a little bit lower. But you're not going to spend more than, at most, maybe 10% of your career in combat, even if your job is directly tied to combat. Because you got to train. You got to plan the missions. I mean, our normal planning cycle was 24 to 72 hours. Sitting in front of PowerPoint, considering whether or not I should hang myself or blow my brains out because we're arguing over the font that we're using to submit for mission approval.
Really?
Oh, you're studying the weather. You're studying the terrain. I've had slides and mission briefs sent back not be approved because I didn't orient the helicopter the correct direction on the slide. They're like, hey, you need to fix this and then resubmit it. Like, if you wanted to shut down the average day military, it wouldn't be through a kinetic act. You would need to put some type of code into Microsoft Office, and we're done. Because we operate on Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Office. We'd sit there and we'd plan and we would brief and we'd submit for approval. That's 3 days. Then you'd go do an objective that would last for 10 hours.
Whoa.
Repeat the cycle.
I'm too ADD for that.
Well, you break up the tasks. So the last thing you would want is one person creating the entire plan. So somebody's doing the communication plan, the medevac plan, the insertion plan, the route planning. We don't ever really brief what we're going to do inside of the objective because that's kind of the soup and nuts that you train for at all times. Like, everything is to get there, and then, okay, that's actually our job. But we focus on all those other things. Then, primary, secondary, tertiary plan for each one of those things. Phase lines for each one of those things. None of that has ever shown up in any movie. What doesn't show up in any movies is vast majority of time the intelligence is bad and you hit what's called a dry hole. You go to a building, you approach the structure, you breach the door, and it's just the intelligence is wrong. It's either empty or it's the wrong person. That happens all the time. It's not exciting though. So we pay the people money, they fix their door, and we go back and we try to find the person again. None of that shows up in any of the mediums because they're too compressed.
With all your experience in the military and your knowledge of what the real world in these combat environments is like, how do you feel when you hear people talk about defunding the military or decreasing the military, or that we don't need it, or that we shouldn't have the kind of budget that we have right now? The people that don't understand the real threats that are out there, and that if you do not have a well-trained, well-funded, experienced military that really understands these things, you've got real danger at your door.
Yep. I'm glad that they live in a place where they have enough space to develop those thoughts, because they're not under pressure, because the military is doing the job that they should be doing. There are, like I said, so many misconceptions about what the military does, what we do overseas, how many countries we are in overseas, how deep we are into some of these countries, how forecasted and how forward-looking the military is, looking for emerging threats as opposed to just responding. And all of that creates space so people can exercise their right to voice their First Amendment, right of saying those things.
Does it frustrate you, though, that they don't have a real understanding?
I'm grateful that they live in a place where they don't have that great understanding, because, like I said, they have the space to be confused. They're not pushed under a thumb. They're not being told, you have to say this or it's going to be your fucking head in the square.
Right.
It is frustrating for me at times, but I balance that with that's what this country is supposed to be about. You're supposed to be able to voice your dissent, right? And I believe that the system will correct, and it does correct for itself. There are people that believe that, but I think the majority of people, again, silent majority versus extreme minority. I think those people are in the extreme minority, but they're very vocal. I think most people are incredibly appreciative of what the military does. But having said that, if you've never served in the military and you've never been in a combat occupation, and then you've never applied that occupation for real, there's going to be a gap, and there's going to be a gap in understanding, and that's okay. So it's frustrating, yes, but I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad that they are not, and this country is not in a position where they are getting drafted and forced into that position. I'm glad that it was me that did that and had to bear any weight or burden that came with that to allow them to have whatever opinion they want.
That's a great perspective. That's a very healthy way of looking at it. And I probably think it's probably the only manageable way of looking at it.
I think you'd go crazy otherwise, because otherwise, and then what are you going to do? Go to a rally and hold up another? Like, it's like, let's. Right. Because initially I have to fight back the initial anger, but eventually give me a little bit of time, and the hopefully relatively sane head is going to prevail. And I had again that night I got hurt. It changed the way that I thought about things. If I had never gotten hurt, and I never thought about my own mortality, and I never thought about, I spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not what I did in the military has had any impact. 0.0001. I don't know if I would have thought about that if all I had ever done was just doing the occupation that I did. I needed that lifting of my head to have that perspective. I did. I don't think all people do, but I needed that.
How long did... sorry, keep going.
I was going to say, I think that night, in some ways, helps me have the perspective I have now with those people.
How long is the average career of someone who's a SEAL?
Well, if you want to retire, you got to do 20 years in a wake up. And they should change
What's a wake up?
Wake up the next day. You got to do 20 years. Oh. You have to do 20 years to the day. So wake up the day after your 20th. But they need to change the term also. Retirement pay in the military should be, in my opinion at least, replaced with money that you are going to get paid until you find your second career. Because you're not going to retire on $3,000 a month.
Right.
But if you want to make it to retirement, you have to do 20 years. The only reason I get a retirement is because I was medically retired. So they basically, I don't know how it happens in the system, but they put me in that category as essentially have made it 20 years.
What happens with most guys when they hit 20 years? Do they retire?
It's hit or miss. On the enlisted side of the house, they start throwing what at that phase of your life is going to be a lot of money at you. They'll try to get you to re-enlist, and I never took this money, and so I'm not exactly sure, but it's about 5 years of re-enlistment, and it's about $150 grand, which is a ton of money if you're in the military. And if you re-enlist while you're overseas, every penny of that is tax-free, because you're going to get it in increments per year.
150 per year?
Total.
For 5 years?
Yeah. It's not, but here's the deal. It's a lot of money if you're used to having your head down, and you're used to making 90 a year. And you're in your late 30s, and you realize, oh my God, I buy a house with that money, right? You'll take it. Right. And every year that you do over 20, they will add, I believe, 1/2 of a percentage point to your military retirement. So if you do 20 years in the military, you will get 50% of your base pay, which doesn't include the dive pay, demo pay, jump pay, hazardous duty pay, all the difference in money that I made. I get the exact same retirement, which is totally fine, and I signed up for this as a person who was in front of the radar scope for 20 years. We get the exact same paycheck at the end. If you do 21 years, you get 50.5. 22 years, 51%. So it keeps incrementally going up. So some guys will go up to 30. Most guys, by the time they get to 20, and I will say this, it depends on what's going on in the world. When it was peak wartime, 2007, 2009, not a lot of guys were getting out. Most of the guys were re-upping because they wanted to strap the boots back on and go back overseas. And they're like, hey, I'll re-enlist while I'm overseas. Tax-free money. I get to go do what I want to do. It's a win-win. But most people, as the operational tempo has slowed, anecdotally, what I've seen is they are looking more towards the future, going to get out around 20. If not, they'll get out around 25 after they take that re-enlistment bonus. And if you're staying into like your 30s, you're in for the long haul.
When you look at the news, do you pay attention to potential conflicts internationally and the things that are going on?
Yes and no. Not from a I'm not looking at them to inform my opinion. I'm just kind of curious as to what the news agencies are reporting, because having lived on the other side of that and doing things that will eventually make the news days, weeks, or months later, the news is generally behind on that cycle. And the military does do a good job and has continued to do a better job of kind of forecasting those things and spreading out as much as necessary.
But do you see anything now, like, I know Trump got a lot of criticism for saying they were going to pull troops out of Syria.
Yep.
And when you see, the debate about that, or possible actions against North Korea and all this kind of stuff, like how do you view this? I mean, obviously you view this as a guy who has served and's been overseas, but do you look at things like these are potential issues that are coming up and things you need to be concerned with?
The Syria the Syria one, there are guys from the community over there. They've been actively engaged. Iraq, it's funny. The news reported for a long time, we've withdrawn from Iraq. All U.S. troops are out of Iraq. No, they weren't. We've always had a presence there since we invaded in 2003. So, and I can go tit for tat on a lot of issues where the news gets it wrong, which is why I don't necessarily look at it for me to inform my opinion. Mm-hmm. Syria, certainly any area where we allow a place for, and the only word I have for it is evil, to grow, it's going to happen. The problem with the strategy that I see it is that actually, so we started in Afghanistan, and again, this is my opinion, not the military opinion, I can only speak for myself. We went into Afghanistan, we were incredibly effective. So we cut the head off of that snake, but it spawned two more. You go into Iraq. You can argue whether or not we were effective, but then all of a sudden we started seeing foreign fighters coming in from all of these different countries. And the tactics that we started seeing used in Iraq, like my first deployment to Afghanistan in 2002, it was not uncommon to drive around in vehicles that were not ballistic. They were not resistant to mines. Tacoma, a thin-skinned Tacoma. The bullet would zip right through. Fast forward to Afghanistan in 2008, and they're starting to see vehicles being detonated by bombs that we first saw in Iraq that were coming across the border into Syria, where they had the ability to allow, again, for lack of a better term, that evil to grow, to learn, to come across the border, to engage American forces, then to flee into a sovereign nation we couldn't do anything about. Then we started seeing that in Afghanistan. But we got effective anytime that these people would get together and have a large group, we'd get effective at either capturing them or killing them. So they realized they need to be disaggregate. So now we've spread this. I think the last stat that I saw was ISIS is in 64 countries. And the problem that I see with the U.S. military is that we're very, very good at going in and cutting the head off the snake, but we're not good at creating and holding infrastructure. And the timeline required to hold that infrastructure is well beyond the palate, I think, of most Americans. And the best example I can point to is South Korea. We still have bases with an American presence in South Korea. That war ended decades ago. We still have bases in Germany. We have bases in Italy. Now, we're not necessarily using them for the same purposes, but if we really want to control that area, we have to be prepared to stay there for that long. And I don't think the U.S. military, one, has enough personnel to do that, and I don't think the American populace has the palate to allow that to happen.
Do you think that that's necessary, that in order to protect people from whether it's ISIS or whatever comes after ISIS? I mean,
yep.
Obviously ISIS is fairly recent, right?
We went to Al-Qaeda to ISIS, and they changed, to ISIL and all that. Yep.
And whatever could be next.
Yep.
So you feel like we have to maintain presence in that part of the world, period?
I think we should use the military as a measure of last resort. I think that war should be a measure of absolutely last resort, and I would love to see us evolve to a point where we use it less and less and less. I describe it as you're standing at a dam, and you can see a little spout coming out. Do you put your finger in the spout, knowing that it's not going to fix the problem, but it's going to buy you time to hopefully have somebody come and fix the dam, right? That's the option I would go for, versus just leaving it as it is and allowing it to continue to weaken the dam, or another sprout would come out. My theory that the military is really well served to provide that space, to put that finger in that sprout. So yes, I think if we find an area where these ideologies are thriving, we have to do what is necessary to remove that ideology and hopefully destroy it. Not resettle it somewhere else, but actually destroy it. So yes, the short answer is absolutely, if we find areas where we can quash this down, we have to go. But I just hope that there's people smarter than me that have a much longer term strategy, because all we're doing, in my opinion, is the finger in the dam.
And is there a longer term strategy? Like when you see all the global conflicts, I mean, is there a time that we get, I mean, it sounds insane to say that there's never going to be a time where there's no war. It sounds like an insane thing to say.
I don't know if there's ever been a time, at least globally, not that the U.S. was involved, but I don't know if there's ever been a time where there hasn't been war.
I don't think there has.
I don't think there can be because, and I think we talked about this the first day I met you, there's X people and there's Y people. They're not going to get along. It doesn't matter what your belief is, you have an axis somewhere that has another belief. And if you go to the extreme end of that belief, that individual may be willing to take action against you, violent action against you for your belief. And I don't think there's a way around that because humans are just too diverse.
But is it possible that one day we'll move past this? I mean, is there any plans at all to try to facilitate some sort of a peaceful world civilization where, you know, all nations kind of get along in some sort of a mutually agreeable way? I mean, does anybody have some sort of 100-year plan? Isn't that hilarious that that's a funny thing to say?
I mean, they didn't brief me on it, if it exists. But
isn't that fucked, though? I mean, human beings are always going to shoot and kill each other. We're always going to have war. Isn't that fucked?
Since the inception of human beings, it seems like, at least at some level, and thankfully it's microscopic in comparison to the overall total,
right?
But it's happening. I think it's happened since man has been walking on Earth.
And the only way that we feel today that we can protect ourselves is to have the more dominant, more powerful military and to make sure that we're the ones that get to dictate whether or not evil flourishes.
Yeah, I mean, I would want I want the dominant ability of our military to continue to grow, but I'd like to see, and I think it's already moving this direction, smaller, more surgical uses of it. The military, in my opinion, is not good at building infrastructure and holding terrain for a long period of time. It's just not what we're designed to do. Right? It's not the design of the military, for that matter.
What is the overall view about getting out of Syria?
It probably depends on the people that you ask.
What about people that you talk to?
Both sides of the coin. I will get answers from, I think we're making a difference, to we're wasting our time. And I got that the initial invasion of Iraq, the initial invasion of Afghanistan. There is one of the things that I enjoyed about the community I came from is that critical thinking it's rewarded. It's not, there's no attempt, and people think about this, you know, you watch Full Metal Jacket, you know, choke yourself with my hand, and you get told what to do and how to do it and how much time you have to do it. People think that critical thinking has no place in the military, but where I came from, that's what we're looking for, is people who are able to critically think. So there would be, we would have political arguments, religious
Az előző
arguments,
videóban megbeszéltük, hogy
philosophical
hogyan
arguments in the
tudtok
team room,
felszerelést
and then
szerezni,
come
és
together
azt
and go
fejleszteni
do
magas a
exactly what it is
díszkor.
that our nation expected us to do. So you're going to get both. There are people who are conservative and liberal, Republican and Democrat, and everything in between. So I wish I could give you like a very precise answer, but I have heard every spectrum of answer, from this is awesome to this is stupid.
You know what confuses me? I've heard different opinions on Assad, whether Assad is evil, whether he's gassed his citizens, or whether or not he's a victim of propaganda or some mass smear campaign. I'm like, whoa, this is way past my pay grade.
Sajnos
I've heard the
attól
same
még,
thing,
hogy
and it's
magas a
beyond mine as well
díszkor.
too.
It's frustrating because, you know, when you don't know whether or not this is some propaganda or this is a real threat, or whether, you know, whether it's something like the Saddam Hussein situation where, yes, he was an evil dictator, but also removing him might create a power vacuum like Libya.
Did create a power vacuum. Yep.
And Gaddafi with Libya. I mean, Libya is a horrific example of that, right?
Yeah. And I don't know the long-term solution to those problems. It's, like I said, I spend enough of my waking hours truly questioning whether or not anything that I was involved in made my family or your family or Jamie's family safer. Did my actions erode what the rest of the world thinks about the United States of America? And I mean, I flow back and forth. I think it had an impact in the moment. I think it had an impact stopping the water coming out of the dam. I think it was essential that it needed to be done. But I don't know if any of that has an impact beyond that time period that it occurred.
How much does it help you in talking about this stuff to give you a perspective? Like, I know Cleared Hot, your podcast,
Yep.
You're very active with that. How much does that help you flesh these ideas out and have conversations about them?
One of the most cathartic things that I do is talk on the podcast about these topics. So, and I'll do a mix between guests and Q&A. And guess what people ask me about? They want to know about war, and they want to know about that stuff. And it forces me to sit there and truly gauge the depth of my beliefs and then answer the questions for myself as to why do I believe this. It is by far one of the most cathartic things that I have done, is the ability to sit down and reflect. And I mean, I'm pretty honest about, I mean, if people ask me about killing, I'll talk about killing. If people ask me about mistakes, I'll tell you the worst mistakes that I ever made. Parenting, relationship with my wife, military, fill in the blank. So it's been huge. And be honest, I mean, you know this, I owe the suggestion from you to start in that podcast. I owe you a huge thank you for giving me that nudge.
Well, you're so good. You were great on my podcast. I just knew you would do great at it. Yeah, I don't know. I probably have said to too many people, you should start a podcast. But it's worked with so many, with Jocko.
Phenomenal. And I bet you it's cathartic for him as well, too. I haven't
Yeah.
asked him about it, but I would suspect that it's the same thing.
Yeah. he's a unique human. He's an American treasure.
He should go in a time capsule right next to Jerry, number one.
He really should, man. He's something special. But it's also like in terms of motivation, he's a mindset alterer. Like you hear the way he discusses things and thinks about things, and if you can adopt those ideas and put them into your own head, you really can shift who you are and how you move through this world.
If you can adopt a fraction of his ideas,
Yeah.
or it'll change your philosophy. There are some people that I see go very, like they seem to be searching and they just want to dive in. It's like, maintain some of yourself and adopt as much of that as you possibly can, because you can go too far in anything. But yeah, the stuff that he's doing and the number of people, the number of times his name comes up and in a positive manner, it's unbelievable. And I mean, I listened to the JRE where you're like, you know what, Jocko? I'm going to tell you something that I think I've said too much. You should start a podcast.
Well, Goggins is another one. Goggins just being a guest on this podcast. I know he hasn't started his own podcast, but one thing he did do is if you listen to Goggins' audiobook, in his audiobook, he has the book itself, which is read by another guy, and then him and that guy discuss various chapters in the book and discuss the real events that led to these different things and how he felt about them. So it's a podcast wrapped up in a book, and it's excellent.
So much better than just reading, chapter and verse.
Yes.
All that additional information and all the breadth and depth that you can gather from that.
Yeah.
It's an incredible medium. I don't know, I think I told you this. I had never listened to a podcast before I came on yours, so I didn't.
Well, we went a little crazy on that one, and
I maybe, I talked a touch about Guantanamo Bay, but I still would say the same thing. I just maybe would have been more educated about the breadth and depth of your podcast. I didn't realize and again, I'm a fraction in comparison to other podcasts out there, but even the volume of response that I get to mine is unbelievable. The number of people who are consuming this type of medium is mind-blowing.
Well, it's free, which is great, and it's easy. You get it on your phone instantly, so you could be in your car, your phone is Bluetoothed up to your car, and you say, oh, there's a nuclear hot. Bam, you press play, it starts playing.
Yeah.
And because, essentially it's audio is not that it's not that big a file. It can stream really easily over 4G, like instantaneously. It's amazing. It's just to have everything free and instantly accessible like that. So if you're a truck driver, if you're driving long distances for work, or if you're traveling on a plane,
and you can scroll, pick your topic.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want to learn about? There's a podcast out there for it, whatever it is.
For anything. There's crime podcasts, and there's comedy podcasts, and politics, and technology. It's like, it's never ending. And there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them. They're all free.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing medium, and it's also a medium with a very low gate of entry. Like, it's not difficult to jump over that gate or to get through. All you need is an account somewhere, and you can do. I've done a bunch of them just with my iPhone, just using the voice recorder application from Voice Notes from an iPhone, record it, and then I'll send it to Jamie, and Jamie will upload them. Like, we've done a bunch of them on planes, where just me and Tony Hinchcliffe have sat on a plane and we have a couple of cocktails, start talking shit into the iPhone.
Into the phone.
Yeah, it's and then that reaches 1 million people.
Yeah, I mean, $400. You can start a podcast for $400.
Yeah,
you get a recording device and some way to gather the sound, and you're off and running.
Yeah, and there's so many people out there with unique perspectives, like you, like Jocko, like there's hundreds of them. It's just it's an exciting time. Exciting to get a medium. But listen, we just did fucking 3 hours. How crazy is that? It's almost 4 o'clock.
It always feels like 90 minutes.
I know. Well, it's a time warp in this room, man. There's something weird. I think it's this table. Something going on. Seems to be it. Andy, I love you, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you, man. Andy Self, ladies and gentlemen. Clear Hot Podcast available everywhere. Go get it. Bye. YouTube, unless you have some non-binary handle that you enjoy. It's a new world.
I don't.
Please introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Mike Hart, originally from St. John's, Newfoundland. Now I'm residing in London, Ontario, and I'm a family doctor. And I've been practicing cannabis medicine for just over 5 years.
And use her. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Legit. Hello, Bill. What's going on?
Here.
You are here with a book. You got a book of shit.
I got a book.
You come prepared.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to write. I'm trying to get back into handwriting.
For people who don't know, Bill is the CEO and co-founder of Minds.com, and we've been going back and forth through email, and you got hoaxed by some dude who said he was Joey Diaz.
It did happen.
He really believes. Like, Joey's been on my network, and I'm like,
He was messaging me in Joey's voice.
Yeah.
Like, basically telling me that there's weird people out there.
yeah. Well, that's not hard to do,
Yeah.
you know? You watch enough Joey.
Basically just cloning his tweets.
Cocksucker.
Yeah.
Yeah, every Monday morning or so, there's a tweet about someone needs to suck your dick. That's it. They need to suck your dick. You need to let them know. That's on the regular. What's the notes, man?
Just some rambling from this morning.
Yeah. Important stuff.
It's actually the first thing that I've written in this notebook. I've not been doing handwriting much at all in the last year, probably. Mostly digital, which is not good because I actually majored in English.
Yeah, you definitely lose your ability to write words. It's funny. I tried writing in, for whatever reason, I write mostly in all caps because I just mostly just write notes. But I tried writing with like lowercase letters, and then I tried writing in cursive, and my cursive is like, it's almost like I have to relearn it.
Yeah, I was finding just like trailing off at the end of certain words, but I blend it all together.
You what?
I blend it all together with capital and lowercase.
Oh, why do you do that?
I mean, well, just as a normal person with proper grammar.
I thought you were just mixing them up randomly.
No.
Okay.
Though I did write my college thesis in all lowercase.
Why?
Typed.
Were you protesting?
Yeah, kind of. Stupid.
It's like a cool move, right? I'm not going to use any uppercase. Who cares, man?
There's weird, like, postmodern theory about capitalization. And that's
Oh,
kind
really?
of what I was talking about. I got a little bit indoctrinated at UVM.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, this one class was called critical theory.
Which one is what is UVM?
Vermont.
Vermont. Yeah. Oh, Vermont is like
Yeah.
super social justice-y, right?
And
cool.
paved with good intention.
Yeah. They have
So-
great ice cream up there too. Nice folks.
But like this one class was called critical theory, and we had to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer and apply like Marxist theory to it to show how like it's the rise up of the lower class. It's like you're forced to write these papers in like a certain way.
Yeah. What are they trying to prove?
Class division.
Class division in Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
It's there. There's like books and books written about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And
What?
Marxism. Yeah.
Come on. Really? What do they have to say?
I don't remember. I don't even want to go into it.
It's amazing. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian and what is it? The other
Sokol?
woman's name? Yes, Helen. Shit, didn't meet her, unfortunately. The grievance studies hoaxes that they submitted a bunch of fake studies to these journals, and not only got reviewed but got lauded and praised for their academic scholarship.
Yeah, I think that stemmed from this guy Sokol, who first trolled a lot of the postmodern journals, and he was the first. So it's called a Sokol hoax to do that kind of trolling.
It's hard to figure out who's who, right? It's hard to figure out what's the hoax.
I got tricked by that. There's this one thing called the postmodernism generator online. It's a computer that writes articles that puts all of this fancy language together. And someone sent it to me, and I showed it to my teacher. And I was like, this is awesome. But it was nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you, what do you make of all this hoaxing? You've been hoaxed twice then. that you've just admitted in the first minute of the show.
I mean, I think that you sort of have to have the right to
hoax?
to hoax.
Yeah.
To be wrong. To mess up.
Well, that's not messing up. That's deceiving people.
True.
But you kind of have the right to do that, too. You kind of have the right to troll.
Yeah, you don't have the right to impersonate, but I have the right to get trolled and be wrong.
Well, you don't have the right to impersonate, like you can't have a verified account and pretend you're Joey Diaz.
Oh,
But-
no, of course not.
But harmless trolling like that guy did to you, isn't that kind of like part of freedom?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Like
comes
taking
with-
down disinfo from social networks because it's wrong. That doesn't make sense. It also depends
It
on
doesn't
the
make
intent.
sense?
I mean,
Like if someone
It's
is
slippery.
purposely, okay, let's say that you find some Chinese bot that's purposely disseminating incorrect and negative information about maybe a potential presidential candidate. Let's pick one. Tulsi Gabbard. They're disseminating fake news about her. You know for sure that it's fake. You know for sure who the I don't know how you know, but you know for sure who the source of it is. You don't think that should be taken down?
I think that if it's illegal, it should be taken down.
If it's illegal.
Yeah.
Okay. What if it's just lies?
Then that could be illegal. I'm not a lawyer, so
Right.
I'm trying to position the network or just like advocate for other networks to take more of a neutral stance. There's this cool thing called the Manila Principles, which the Electronic Frontier Foundation wrote with a bunch of other internet freedom groups, which is talking about how digital intermediaries shouldn't be making subjective decisions about what's getting taken down and should require a court order. Now, with a DNS provider or something less content focused,
Explain DNS to people who don't know.
like a domain name.
server.
Yeah. So
Explain what that is.
it's like where you buy a domain, and but for a social network, we're hosting tons of content, so it's harder for us because we see illegal content, and we should proactively take some of it down if we know it's illegal.
Right.
But at the same time, it's just slippery.
Well, I follow quite a few people who have, I don't want to say they have hoax accounts, but they have parody accounts. And a lot of people read into it wrong and think they're being honest and argue with them. Like there's this progressive dad guy on Instagram. You ever follow him?
know exactly what you're talking about.
He's hilarious.
The one I follow today.
I follow quite a few of them. There was a guy who was the wrong skin guy who was saying he was born in the wrong color skin, that he's transracial, and he would make these ridiculous arguments about it. And Elwick, what was his name? He apparently is a comic from the
I'm thinking this sort of started. I don't know the moment they had to do it, but let's say 4 years ago, a lot of those troll accounts had to sort of say we're not this person. For instance, the main one I follow is now it's known as Not Bill Walton. He tweets funny sports jokes all night long about like what's on TV, as though he's Bill Walton, like in Bill Walton's voice. But like at some point he had to put in the name like this is not Bill Walton, but he still has quite a few followers and he still gets the jokes out. But
That's funny.
yeah.
Well, what's your stance on people who make accounts of your stuff, put it out there?
Well, I got a lot of them. You know, there's a ton of them. Some of them actually do good stuff. Like they make little clips and they put those clips online, and it's good. It's good for people who enjoy the show. They get a little 1-minute snippet of things. And then some of them will pretend to be me and contact people and try to book them on the show, which is really weird. Yeah, we've had that. But you know, I mean, who is that? Is that a 16-year-old kid in Indiana? I mean, who is that? It's odd. But it's overall, like, get past my own personal feelings because it's about me. It's interesting. This is this strange new ground that we're covering. You know, I mean, we've been discussing this ad nauseum on the podcast lately, that essentially we've been dealing with 20 years of this. And in those 20 years, it's changed radically. I mean, what it is, it's become something completely different. It's become something that changes public opinion on things overnight. It's become something where you can distribute information from, you know, person to person about some, you know, a huge international news event. You could get all of your information from Twitter, whether it's what happened in Venezuela or what, you know, anywhere there's something in the world. People are turning to social media almost before they turn anywhere. You're looking, when I hear about something, I almost always, before I even Google it, I almost always go to Twitter and check Twitter and see what's going on and see if there's
DuckDuckGo it.
DuckDuckGo.
Have you heard of that one?
No, what's that?
It's like a privacy-focused search engine. It's like pretty much the only privacy alternative to Google. It's like this idea that we say, oh, just Google it.
Right.
Why do we? I mean, our whole process has been to like purge proprietary surveillance tools from our company, and I've been trying to do it myself, like getting off Facebook, Twitter, getting off Instagram. It's just like they're so abusive to everybody, and it's like there's brilliant people who work there. I mean, Instagram is such a well-designed app. Right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. But
So what do you think is abusive about it, particularly?
there's
Start with Twitter.
they're all the same.
They're all the same. Do you think they're all the same because they're all gigantic businesses?
Yeah, and they're all the same because none of them share their source code, and they all spy on everybody, and they don't show you what is happening behind the scenes. They don't show you what the code's doing. So, like in that note I wrote to you the other day, I compare it to like food transparency. You know, 50 years ago, nobody thought about that, and then 20 years ago, everyone's like, why? But why wouldn't you want to know what's in your apps?
Yeah.
I mean, it's super sketchy what they're doing.
But how so? Like, what's super
We
sketchy?
don't know, but we know that they're spying on everyone and tracking you everywhere you go. They're targeting things of you based on physical location, browser history. Even when you're not on those websites, they're following you around where you're going on the internet.
Right. And so some people accept that for this free search engine with free email and things along those lines. Accept the fact that a certain percentage of what they're doing is not going to be private. Or at least their searches are not going to be private. Like, say if you search, like you're thinking about buying a Jeep, and you search Jeeps, and you look at, 2019 Jeep, and then all of a sudden all your Google ads are about Jeeps.
Right.
They're like, no, we know you're thinking about Jeep, Bill.
And I don't think that makes people want to spend more time on Google and Facebook.
What do you think it does? Do you think it freaks them out?
I think that we're just numb to it, and so we accept it.
I think it's more than that.
Yeah, and so there's all different layers of like what we use with your browsers, your apps, your operating system, your food, your government, your energy. Like all of this technology has code that's associated with it. So, and when you open up your computer, when you sign into a browser, when you open up an app, you are empowering that app. That's how the apps of the world become huge, monstrous corporations. It's because we all use them every day.
Right.
So if you switch from Mac OS to GNU Linux or Debian or Ubuntu, if you use Brave or Firefox, if you DuckDuckGo is actually proprietary, which is annoying, but they are very privacy focused. And then there's apps, there's Minds, there's all sorts, there's other open source decentralized social networks out there that you can potentially federate with. There's really cool new interesting protocols like that and IPFS that are like more torrent style backend. So there's actually no servers in a giant warehouse like Facebook and Google. It's fully peer-to-peer. And we're trying to balance it because it's not like decentralization equals good and centralization equals bad. But like, you know, in order to get a sweet app like Instagram style, you need servers to like process video. So the tech is still sort of immature in the fully peer-to-peer, like, you know, Bitcoin style internet, but we're definitely getting there. And I just think it's important for people to use things that are transparent to them and respecting our freedom.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with these giant companies is that once they become big, you kind of use them as a default, and it's very difficult to get people to communicate with you off of them. You know, it's so hard to say, hey man, I'm launching this new social media app. I would imagine you could speak to this. I'm launching this new social media app, and I want you to join it. People are like, but I'm already on fucking Facebook. I'm already on Google. I'm already on Instagram. I don't want to do that, man. It's too much extra.
And we make it a million times harder for ourselves because we're not scooping into people's contacts and, you know, taking all their information.
But you're not.
We're
Minds.
not. No.
Okay.
So like when you give your address book to an app,
Who does that?
most apps.
You gotta be an asshole.
You know, no, but when you say, oh, I want to find my friends who are on this app, and you share your contacts,
You're not supposed to do that.
you're not supposed to do that yet. But most people do. And you know, your friends didn't give you permission to give Facebook their phone number.
Do you do that?
I probably used to, like 7, 8 years ago, whatever. But I don't do it anymore.
I always say the same thing when it pops up. Get the fuck out of here. That's always what I say. Would you like to share your contact? Get the fuck out of here. No, you can't have my contacts, you asshole. I know what you're doing. Facebook is a weird one, man. It's such a sneaky one. You know, Facebook and, you know, like all this, the congressional hearings and the inner workings of it all. And the fact that it profits off of outrage, so it wants people to argue. Like the AI, the computer learning specifically wants people to have like contentious debates about things because that keeps their eyes focused on the website. And if your eyes are focused on Facebook, you know, then those Facebook ads are very valuable. It's really fascinating, man.
I think the outrage is unavoidable on any network. It's more, you know, are you gonna take down? They're taking down outrage.
Some, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So and it just seems so inconsistent and subjective how they're applying. I mean, even just yesterday, I think some journalist got banned
Yes.
from Facebook.
Yeah, you
who-
aware of the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna send this to you, Jamie, because it's a really crazy one.
Because they wanted her to show who her funding sources were, and I didn't even know that there was an area where you could show that. So it's almost like they're making this up as they go along.
Yeah, Kyle Coon's gonna send me this today. I'm gonna send this to you right now, Jamie. One second. Hold on. Quiet. Unfortunately, this is an audio show.
This is live air,
Yes.
not dead air.
There you go. Okay, buddy, I just sent it to you. Okay, Facebook suspended in the Now tweets page at the behest of CNN and the U.S. government-funded think tanks. It says we had almost 4 million subscribers, did not violate Facebook rules, were given no warning, and Facebook isn't responding to us. So yeah, what actually started this off?
I mean, who knows? They don't communicate with anyone. They've been banning legit accounts for years. You cannot even send a Minds.com link through Facebook Messenger right now. It's blocked.
What?
Yeah.
What?
If you post it in the news feed, it says, careful, could be an unsecure website.
Oh.
Just clicked on a link from TMZ yesterday and got the same thing on Twitter. Twitter said this might be malicious or spam. There could be
From Minds?
No, it's from TMZ link. It was clicking this like this story is on TMZ. Here to
Oh.
see the rest of the story.
So they're trying to
They
keep
should've-
you from going to TMZ?
Yeah, I don't know why. It's the first time I've ever seen that.
Huh.
It's probably caught up in some algorithm. I sent an actual written letter to Facebook about it. Obviously, they don't come back. And there's no
A
human
written letter?
activity.
You wrote it with a piece of paper?
No, that would have been cool. I signed it with ink. But
Really?
Well, yeah, no, because our lawyer said to, you know, that actually proves that you sent them something, some sort of diligence. But there's just no recourse, and
Right.
they're lost.
So explain. So if someone is trying to say on Facebook Messenger, hey, you should go check out Minds.com, it won't let you post that link?
Nope.
And what is their excuse? They don't tell you. So is it because you're a competing social media network?
I don't know. I don't want to get into. I don't know.
You don't know.
I'm not going to say
But you just
that,
know that
but
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't know why it does, but you know it does.
And they're calling us unsecure, and I'm pretty sure that Facebook got hacked. You know, they compromise everybody's data. Like, you want to talk about unsecure, there's no more unsecure site that exists.
It is kind of funny, right? I mean, after those hearings and after all the Russia stuff, yeah, it is kind of funny calling somebody else unsecure.
Yeah, they're insecure. Mark Zuckerberg is very insecure.
Well, he's also stupid rich. He seems like he's too rich, like he fucked up. Like he's there sipping water like a robot, trying to figure out what the fuck he's doing with his life.
I think that they're scared because they know they've betrayed everybody, and so it's hard to get them to speak. You know, it's interesting with Dorsey here, because I, you know, give him credit for speaking, but the fact is that he's not answering the questions.
Well, he's bringing somebody else in to answer the questions in the next go-around, and so that should be very
You
interesting.
think he actually didn't know the answer?
I think he probably doesn't know all the specifics because he's a CEO of not one but 2 different corporations. He's busy as shit, and also workers.
But true. But I think that when we look at the policy that exists on these networks, like he
Yes.
is in control of the policy to a large degree. There's a board.
I don't
there's
know
a
if that's-
decision. There's a decision-making
Yes.
process, but he has a large voice.
Okay, I don't know how large his voice is. I assume that's probably true, but one of the things we did detail on the last podcast with Tim Pool was how he wasn't the CEO for quite a long
He got
time.
fired and then rehired.
Yeah. So obviously there's some contention, there's some issues, and you know there's a lot of money involved in these things, and I think that plays a giant part in how they decide to make decisions. And
But do you think that
course
an
they do.
advertiser, in reality, doesn't, like, say you're an advertiser and you want to advertise your,
okay.
and there's a video on YouTube that is about something controversial. Does it actually make sense for that advertiser to not show their product on that controversial video? Don't they want to sell computers?
Well, it depends. I mean, if the controversial videos are about how Jews are evil, and you have this video about Jews being evil, and then, you know, you're like, buy Razer computers, come on.
Right. But do you think that people actually... I can understand not wanting to support certain types of content. And maybe advertisers feel like they're supporting that content by advertising next to it. But I also don't think that people, when they're watching a controversial video on the internet, say, oh my gosh, you know, this advertiser is completely out of line for being next to this controversial thing. I don't think that's a healthy direction to move.
Well, okay, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is if you are a giant company that sells things, let's say you're Toyota and you're selling Tundras, you don't want your Tundras to be associated in any way with something that you might think is negative. It's their prerogative. If they're paying for advertising, they can kind of decide. This is one of the things that's leading YouTube in specific, and I've had a ton of conversations about this. It's leading them specifically to try to demonetize things that could be considered distasteful or insensitive or controversial, and it's very frustrating to content creators. When you talk to them, they're essentially saying that they need to do better and that their tools are very blunt, that they don't really have the correct computer learning tools to figure out what is offensive and why. And then there's a human review system, which is very weird, and we've run into that many times, where like we'll have like a podcast with, like, say, Tom Papa, who's an uncontroversial, fantastic stand-up comedian, and it's like demonetized. And then we're like, why? What happened? And then we go, what the fuck did we talk about? We didn't talk about anything crazy.
And it's really damaging for brands when it gets demonetized right away, because it's that initial time period that generates the most revenue.
Yeah.
So when you have to go back and do it, I mean, so I agree with that, but so we built a tool that's like a peer-to-peer advertising tool. So it's not, there's 2 options. You earn crypto for your contributions. And then
Which cryptos do you support?
we have an Ethereum-based token, but we're gonna support all of them.
So what is an
essentially.
Ethereum-based token?
So it's an ERC20 token.
What does that mean?
It means that we basically reward people for all of their activities. So
Okay, so like say if Jamie's posted on Minds and people love his posts, he gets rewarded in some.
yeah.
How much? How much you get?
Well,
If I go buy a
one
house?
token will give you 1,000 impressions.
Oh.
So we're not focused on like, oh, you're gonna make money from this.
Wait a
That's
minute,
not
one,
what we're saying.
One token will give you 1,000 impressions,
Yeah.
or you get 1,000 impressions from. You get a token from 1,000 impressions.
When you use a token to advertise online,
Oh.
you get 1,000 impressions when you boost your post with it.
So wait a minute. If you use the crypto, you use a token, you guarantee views. Yeah. Well, that's weird, isn't it? Well, you're guaranteeing people see something.
Well, when you boost it, it gets fed to people's newsfeed chronologically.
Right. I see.
So there's just
Yeah.
a backlog.
So sort of like when Instagram has those sponsored posts.
Except we're not spying on people when we send them.
Instagram spies on people too.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'm stupid. Help me out.
Yes, they do. And the thing is, we just don't know. So this is where free and open source software is just essential. Like the big networks, there's no excuse for them not to be sharing their software.
Right.
It's like when you're a public forum on that scale, the community just has a right to know what the algorithms are doing.
So you think that they're not sharing their software because their software is encoded and designed to spy on you and extract information and sell that information?
Partially.
Like when Jamie gives up your contacts, when he signs up for an app and says, yes, you can get access to all my contacts.
There's a lot of reason, and they don't want people to compete with them. Like anyone could actually take all of our code and make their own social network and compete with us. They could start set up on their own servers, and we encourage that. That's what like the Fediverse is called.
That's what Elon Musk does with Tesla. All of his electric patents for electric cars.
I think that he opened up the patents. I don't think if he open sourced all the code of the car,
Right.
but he's definitely moving in the right direction of like he wants to build the market.
Yes, and he also wants to save the world. I mean, he legitimately has this, and he also has a shitload of money. He's got enough money. Yeah. I think that's a big factor with those guys.
But don't you think that it's almost like it's going to help whatever network does that? Is more transparent, stops spying on people, is more community run and evolved. Wouldn't that be the network that you would think humanity would want to stick with in the long term? Like, wouldn't that be a good move of them?
Yes and no. For the average person, what are they losing when they get on Facebook or Google? What's bad? What happens?
Well, now
bad
their
in
likes are
life?
going down. Everybody's likes are going down, and that makes everyone very sad.
What do you mean?
Well, the algorithms, you're only reaching 5% of your own followers organically on Facebook now. And they're starting to change the chronological feed on Instagram too. And they know that this causes depression. And they're still doing it because they know that they think they're better at showing you what you want to see than you are. And they want to make money from it.
What do you mean by they know that this causes depression?
They've done studies about mental health in relation to, actually Facebook got exposed like 5 years ago for doing a secret study on like a few million users where they were injecting both positive and negative content into the newsfeed, and they proved that they could affect people's moods. This was with Princeton. There's a huge backlash, and they're like, oh, sorry. Whoops.
Right, but this isn't injecting negative or positive content. This is just moving these images or these posts around so that less people see them.
There's two different topics there. The basic newsfeed on Facebook is now a mysterious conglomeration of thousands of variables, which we don't know. But additionally, like a few years ago, they were exposed for having been experimenting with people's brains.
That's right. I remember that now. That's right. Yeah, I remember thinking like, wow, that's kind of creepy. They're
can do it.
experimenting on the people that are on their site, and they're not telling these people they're experimenting on. Yeah, but if they're trying to make it better, do you think that that's a factor that it actually? I mean, how does it cause depression if your images or your posts are not being seen by as many people?
Have you talked to kids posting on social media and their reactions to how many likes they're getting? They get very, very concerned.
Well, that seems like more of a problem with that.
It is both. It is on both sides. Being addicted to likes is some sort of a,
It's a weird dopamine hit, right?
It's not healthy, and
No.
we need to learn to not care about that. But I think that the core purpose of a social network is to subscribe to someone and see their stuff.
Yeah.
And when people subscribe to you, they see your stuff.
Right.
So when you spend years building up a following on social media, and say you earn 100,000 followers or something, and then suddenly the network says, no, your friends can't see that anymore. That's not cool. And even like Twitter's default newsfeed is no longer chronological. You have to click it to go chronological, and then it defaults back to their weird algorithm thing. So we're saying, look, 100% organic, chronological, raw forever as default. And then if you want to curate, algorithms or have recommended stuff come in as an alternative, fine. But that is the core purpose of social media, is to connect with people that follow you and the other way around.
What do you think the purpose is? Like, why do you think Facebook would decide to have things not in chronological order and only be seen by 5% of your followers? Like, what would be the benefit in that for them?
Revenue.
Revenue, how so? How does that generate revenue?
They just know that they can keep you on the app better.
If you get less likes?
No.
If your stuff is seen by less people, it doesn't make sense.
That's a good point. It sort of works both ways. I think that they think they know the people that you're going to react to the most. So as a consumer, when you're getting that content, the algorithms are showing you what you typically like. Have you noticed that?
I'm really not paying much attention, but I believe you.
So yeah, for creators, it's hurting creators. People who post are getting hurt. People who are sitting there just scrolling, they're the ones who are really getting, addicted. More so with the algorithms.
So how are the people that are posting getting hurt? They're getting hurt because their stuff is being seen by less people?
Yeah.
Because it's not chronological and it's not organic because it's curated. Huh. But aren't they doing it because they think it's going to be a better and an experience that's more conducive to your likes?
That's what they say.
What do you think they're doing it for then?
They're doing it because they have studied through looking at the data how to keep people on the app more.
Right, and that way is to give them, like, say, if I Google or if I look at muscle cars on Instagram. Now, if I go to my search, it's all muscle car stuff. So that's what it is. They say, oh, he likes that. So we're just gonna give him a lot of that.
And I think that's okay as an alternative feed, or to put that somewhere. I just think the core feed always needs to stay pure, because otherwise you're just down the slippery slope again. And
I understand.
it's just feeding. They're injecting things into your head that you didn't ask for.
Right, and they're doing it because they want to keep you around. Yeah, that makes sense. How many different companies are subscribing to that? It seems like all the big ones we're saying are curating and moving things around, and all the big ones have an algorithm that's designed to keep you on board, right?
And that's okay to pursue. I think there's really cool things you can do with AI and machine learning and algorithms that is really beneficial. But it's just taking away people's reach when they have worked years and years to achieve it. It's not okay.
Do you think that this is this marriage between something that is this social media network that's designed to allow people to communicate with each other, and then commerce, like this business? Like, how do we maximize this business? How do we get more profit out of this business? How do we get these people to engage more? And then they start monkeying with the code and screwing with what you see and what you don't see. You think that's what's happening?
Yeah, but in the short term, it's probably working. But in the long term, they're betraying everybody's trust. It has to be more of a consent-based system. So, at least give people, well, it should be opt out by default. And fine, give me messages to opt in so that you can show me certain things. But this whole forcing people into surveillance it just has to stop. It's super scary.
How's it super scary to you?
It's just too much power.
Yeah. It's too much power for something that's supposed to be silly, right? Like, what was Facebook supposed to be? It was supposed to be some silly thing that you just can communicate with friends.
It was, but from the beginning, none of these networks have ever really been about the people of the networks. It's always been closed source since the inception. So, but then you look at open networks out there. You have Wikipedia, totally open source, community run. Granted, they have their issues with moderation, fine. But it's a top 10 website in the world. It's totally open source, Creative Commons content, incredible human achievement. Bitcoin, open source money. WordPress even is an open source CMS system that is like powering 25% of the internet. So why wouldn't that happen in social media? It should. I mean, this is where everyone's hanging out. So we should all sort of collectively even own it. We did an equity crowdfunding round, so like thousands of members of our community actually own the site.
Now, how many people are on Mines?
With like 1.5 million registered, like 250,000 active. We're small. But the weird thing is that even though we're a fraction of the size, especially smaller creators who get better reach on Minds than they do on Facebook and Twitter, because we have this reward and incentive system, sort of like gamified, where you earn reach and you earn more of a voice for contributing. So, like, you could have an account on Twitter for 10 years and post thousands and thousands of tweets, and you never hit that viral nerve, and you just never really get much exposure. So we're trying to help people be heard. And so you'll find a small creator who on other networks has no followers have thousands and thousands of followers.
And what do you think you would like to do with Mines in the future that you haven't been able to do yet?
Engineer the control out of ourselves so that we aren't even in a position to really, take people's stuff down.
Well, what if someone posts your house and your information, where your kids go to school?
I think that on the central servers, obviously, yes, we're always going to moderate. And if it's legal, it can stay. If it's not illegal, it can't. But a decentralized social network is definitely where we have to go. Because, and yeah, okay, it's scary. And, you've talked about this, like, things are getting more transparent. Our lives, this is sort of like the inevitable evolution of technology. I mean, how many hours a day do you stream? A couple? 25 years ago, would you have thought you'd be sharing 20% of your life live streaming to millions of people? Like, our lives are becoming more transparent, just inevitably, it's just pulling us.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Bitcoin, crypto, that torrent type architecture, that is just where we're going, because it's more resilient, it's less censorship prone. There's just benefits of it. I think that we can balance it too. Like, maybe when you post, you have a decision. Do you want to be able to delete this at any point? All right, fine. Then you can post the censor server. Do you want this to get unleashed? Yeah, it's scary because, there's scary stuff on the internet. It's already like that. But, getting into censorship more, does censorship even solve the problem? Or does it make it worse?
What problem?
The problem of crazy content, illegal content.
How could it make it worse?
well, I mean, it seems like it can often amplify radicalization.
It definitely can, right?
Yeah.
And it definitely, when you censor people, it just makes them aware that there's plot against them too, right? It's like a lot of conservatives on Twitter are finding that. Somebody, Sam Harris, actually just sent me an article that was detailing the bias against conservatives on Twitter that they've actually done, like some real studying it, and it's pretty demonstrable. Demonstrable?
It affects both the left and the
That's not
right.
real.
Demonstrable?
Yeah, the way I'm saying it wrong. But it affects the left and the right for sure. Yeah.
That's what Kyle was saying. I watched that video that he did, and
Yeah.
it's anti-establishment that seems to be getting targeted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Abby's been censored on Facebook.
Abby Martin. Yeah.
And yeah, this person today. Most of the stuff coming out of RT is progressive, which is
Mm-hmm.
weird. And who knows what kind of games are getting played behind the scenes with the Russia. Who knows? But the
Yeah.
point is, they have a right to be there. And and this is not YouTube's fault. But remember the YouTube shooter?
Mm-hmm.
She thought she was getting censored on YouTube, and she went and brought a gun to the YouTube headquarters. Like, people get pissed when they get censored. It affects you.
Right, but in her case, you're talking about a crazy person that wasn't
of
really
course,
being
but there's
censored.
crazy people out there.
Yeah.
No,
but she actually wasn't being
Well, she was
censored.
getting censored just like everybody else is getting soft censored on these networks.
Well, she just thought wasn't getting promoted the way she wanted to. I don't think anybody was actively doing anything
No,
to her.
I'm not
because
saying that.
Her stuff was terrible.
I'm saying that the soft censorship of the algorithms, people getting demonetized, this has an impact on psychology.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So I'm not saying they were deliberately targeting her. And it's
So-
horrible what happened, but
So what you're saying is that these algorithms that they use in order to maximize their revenue and give people things that they like, but actually takes away from things being posted chronologically, keeps certain things from being seen by as many people, so it keeps them from being as viral, so it keeps the whole thing from being organic.
yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it gets to that point where we're realizing that all of these things, all these social media things, are really recent. We've only had them for a few years, and we don't necessarily know what the rules should or shouldn't be. So it's good. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. I wanted to find out where these upstarts, where these new people that are coming into the game, like Minds, like where you're coming into the game from, and what is your position on what's wrong with the current state of affairs.
Yeah, and look, there is messed up stuff on social media. Like, we'll get pigeonholed into being like, oh, you support all of this crazy stuff. First of all, most of the users on Minds are like artists, musicians, filmmakers, activists, journalists, just trying to get their content out there. There's a very tiny minority of like actually, crazy content. But
When you say crazy content, what do you mean? You alt-right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not even going to make decisions on what is and isn't crazy. That's
Okay.
not my place. But it's been proven that censorship is not the answer. Look at the history of prohibition.
Yeah.
It's you have digital content, it's substances, it's anything. People want information, and they want the ability to make the decision for themselves.
They certainly do. And then the argument on the other side is when people are distributing, and I'm going to use the big air quotes, hate speech. That's when it gets slippery to me, because who's to decide what's hate speech and what's not hate speech? I've seen people make some ridiculous fucking statements about all sorts of people that are inaccurate. And they do that in order to categorize them and pigeonhole them in an easily definable and dismissible characterization. You just decide, hey, that Bill Ottman guy, that guy's a this. Oh, he's a radical that, and he believes in this, so fuck him. And they're like, okay, fuck him, sweep him away. And then cancel culture comes in, like, we're going to cancel Bill Ottman. We're not listening to him anymore. He lied to us about his source or whatever the fuck you're doing.
Have you heard of Daryl Davis?
No, I have not. Unless I forgot.
Daryl Davis is your boy.
He's my boy?
You'll I haven't met him, but he's
Oh,
my
well,
boy.
you know
I want
that.
him to be my boy. So he is a black man who befriended hundreds of members of the KKK, and he got them all to leave.
He got them to leave the KKK.
All of 200 members left.
Wow.
After he was like, yeah, I'm just going to talk to you.
Really? Did you ever see the W. Kamau Bell's show when he visited with those white supremacists?
Not that specific one.
No, it's really good because he's such a nice guy. He's so easy to get along with that they were they let their guard down around him. And you get to see these people kind of confused that they like this guy.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think initiating human contact
Right.
via the social networks, that's
Okay.
really important.
But to play devil's advocate, it's one of the worst ways for people to express themselves in a way where you consider other human beings' experiences and feelings and the way they're going to receive what you're saying, because there's no social cues. You're not interacting with them. You're not looking at them in the eyes. It's one of the weirder forms of communication between human beings, and one that I would argue we have not really necessarily successfully navigated it yet.
I agree. I was actually saying that I think we should use social media more to get people to get together in real life.
Do you know who Megan Phelps is?
No.
She was with the Westboro Baptist Church. You know, the famous one that protests those soldiers' funerals and, you know, and anything gay, and they're like ruthlessly, viciously fundamental Christians. You know, they do a lot of protesting at funerals and do a lot of stuff to try to get. She was with them for the longest time, and then got on Twitter, and through communicating on Twitter, and when you meet her, you would never believe it in a million years that she was ever this fundamentalist and that she was ever some mean person sending hateful messages to people because their son was gay or whatever it was. Now she's completely cured of it. She has no contact with the church anymore. She's married, she has a kid. She's completely outside of it. She does podcasts now and gives TED Talks and speaks about radicalization and about how she was kind of indoctrinated and grew up in this family. And her grandfather, Fred Phelps, was this, you know, he's a fucking mean guy, like a really mean, he's the God hates fags guy. You know, they would have those signs that they would hold up at soldiers' funerals. I mean, it's like really inflammatory stuff. But through Twitter, through her communicating with people on Twitter, and specifically her now husband, like he cured her, like just with rational discourse and communication, and
Yeah,
she was
people
open
will
to it.
change.
Yeah, they will change. Yeah,
And so that's why banning them, I mean, and I saw in a recent podcast, you've been talking about redemption.
yeah.
So, but I'm curious, do you think people, how does that look like?
Well, look, in the case of like Megan Phelps, that's a real thing, right? She really did change. Another example is Christian Piccolini. Do you know who he is? He was a white supremacist KKK member guy who's been on Sam Harris's podcast. He's also done some TED Talks, who now speaks out against it and talks about how he's indoctrinated and talks about how lost he was and that he was brought into this ideology. There's many people like that all over the world. Majid Nawaz, another perfect example. He was an Islamist. I mean, he was, you know, trying to form a caliphate, was literally thinking about radical Islamic terrorism as being some sort of a solution. Now he's the opposite. Now he's trying to get people to leave, and he's trying to get people to be more reasonable and secular.
Did you see what happened to him?
Yeah, he got punched in the street. Yeah. Some guy called him a fucking packy, I guess, and punched him in the head and fucked his head up. And he's got this giant cut on his head from a ring, and his face is swollen up. But apparently they have the guy on video, and, you know, they think they're going to be able to arrest the guy.
But
I've had Majid on the show. He's a super nice guy.
The hard thing is that, all right, yes, we see these transformations take place. It makes us feel warm inside. And yes, people can change. But at the same time, should people have to go apologize to Twitter? Oh, I'm sorry. Like, can I come back?
Right.
I mean, that's not like, sometimes people are going to think completely differently than you, and you just have to deal with it.
Right.
And that should be okay. We shouldn't force people to come in to our way of thinking in order to have discourse.
No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And, like, who is to decide what this path of redemption is and whether or not you've completed it? Right? Who is to decide? Like, maybe you are like a hyper radical lefty, and maybe Jamie's points of view and yours are just never going to line up. So you're like, fuck him. He's banned for life, which a lot of people have been banned for life. And when you look at some of the infractions they've been banned for, they're like, boy, I don't know about that one. That doesn't really make sense.
Almost none of the high-profile banning cases make much sense.
No. It's like a short-term solution that's creating a long-term problem.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
So I just think that we have to talk about it more. I don't know. It's like, why can't we just get everyone to talk about it?
Yeah.
Like at the same time. I mean, it's like we're just wasting time here.
Well, sort of, but I also think we're figuring it out as we go along with a bunch of different competing ideologies. You know, you have yours, which, like, you look like a hacker on, like, House of Cards. You look like a guy you call in to break into the mainframe server.
I'm not that, honestly.
I believe you're not.
I hang out on GitLab and check out code, but I cannot code. I cannot code.
Listen, man.
I'm not claiming to be a developer. No,
I know you're not.
These people are
They're
another level.
Yeah,
it is incredible.
I understand. Right. Yeah, I get it. Well, that's like if someone says to me, like, oh, you're an MMA fighter. I'm like, I'm definitely not. And they are on another fucking level. Like, there's a different. I know a little martial arts, but just settle the fuck down, right? Same kind of thing. I think, though, that your ideology is going to be your point of view and perspective is going to be very different than maybe someone who's like a radical Marxist. You know, shouldn't they be allowed to post on the site too? Someone who's like an extreme socialist. Someone like AOC,
Yeah.
You know, someone who thinks that we should give money to people who are unwilling to work. Someone who thinks that we should try to engineer society and tax the top X percent, 70-something% of their income. There's a lot of those different people, and we have to figure out how to make it so that, well, we have to figure out a way to make it so all the ideas can compete in the marketplace of ideas, right? All these different ideas can compete, and we can find out which one is better. And we can find out which one is better. Yeah, you don't always find out which one is better, though, right? You find out which one is most popular. I mean, that's what happened with Hitler. Right. You don't really find out what's better. You find out what's got more juice behind it.
It's too risky. Even being in the position that I'm in, I see these edge cases. Like, we say, look, if it's legal, it can be there, but we still see edge cases where we have to make decisions.
Okay, what's like an edge case?
I mean, let's see. I mean, there is, I don't even want to go here, but I will. All right.
Uh-oh.
There is a type of animation.
Uh-oh. Porn anime?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very sketchy. That
Super.
Is, like child porn, animated child porn. And we've taken the stance that, look, it could fall under obscenity laws, so we're not cool. But, that is a huge debate.
Right.
That has not been decided by the Supreme Court. If animated, kids, like, they will do the weirdest stuff. And I just don't want to be telling people what is and what is not art.
Right. So, like, some of that Japanese stuff with tentacles, like, some of that stuff is just like, what is happening here? Like, I get, like, octopuses banging chicks in every hole, and they're choking on it, and they've got one in their ass and one in their vagina, and it's all, like, very, very liquidy. There's a lot of splattering going on. You're like, what the fuck is this? And is that okay? Because it's just art, right? I mean, if it was a person getting fucked left, right, and center by an octopus, you'd be like, yeah, I think that we've crossed some lines here. That's bestiality. But if it's an image, and if then the image is a girl with a schoolgirl costume on, she's dressed like a Catholic schoolgirl with a little skirt, and she's getting banged by an octopus, you're like, what do you do with that? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you do?
It's a good question. I'm glad I don't have a social media site where I have to make that decision. Well, the real concern would be, is this something that is actually illegal?
That's the thing.
Right.
And we've tried to look at the case law, and we've seen that this type of stuff has been, called obscenity before. And so we're just not going to risk it. But I still, all right, nipples.
Nipples.
Look.
Right.
Did you know that Free the Nipple started out
On
with
4chan.
Well, everywhere. It's a whole movement. To be honest, all right,
Right.
Time Magazine just did a really interesting piece about a statue that got banned from Facebook, and it was a
statue?
naked ancient statue that has a nipple. Like, I'm sorry, that's not realistic. That's not helping society. Taking down a naked statue.
Well, we were talking about the other day during the Super Bowl that Adam Levine had his shirt off, and Brian Redband was like, "Hey, wasn't that like what Janet Jackson got in trouble for?"
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Well, why is it okay if Adam Levine shows his nipples and Janet Jackson's nipples are offensive because they're sexualized because she's a woman?
Mm-hmm. This is the weird fact: men had to gain the right to have their nipples shown in public back in the day.
When's the day?
If you go on the Free the Nipples site, there's this. Go on their Instagram or something. I think that's maybe where I saw it back when I used Instagram. But society is evolving. We're gonna get there. We're gonna be able to handle it, I think,
Right.
or give people the control so that they can only see the types of things that they want to see. That's ultimately what it's about.
So, like, you should have like a filter. Like, do I want 18 plus? Do I want PG-13? Like, what kind of distinction do I want?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when things come up, like, one of the things that Instagram's been doing is, like, they say, I follow a lot of hunters, and Instagram has things where they say, warning, this is sensitive content. Nature is Metal gets popped on that a lot, too, because Nature is Metal's an Instagram site that's all, like, these crazy images and videos of animals eating other animals and attacking other animals. And sometimes, some of them, they just decide this one's too fucked up. They just decide.
Right.
Like, there's one of them where a lion is looking out of a wildebeest asshole, like, from the inside. Like, there's this giant hole they've eaten through its stomach, and it's looking out its asshole. And they're like, yeah, this one you're going to have to click on your own. You have to double click. What do you got, Jamie?
Basically, from what I just looked up, Tarzan is the catalyst for why guys wanted to wear their shirts off. They had, like, in the 1920s, 1910s, they had to wear, in pools, they had to wear a top.
Well, look, this only covers one nipple.
Well, they're probably tired or
That's
sweaty.
the
or
rebellion
I don't know.
right there.
That's how they started
They're
doing
pulling
it.
down the strap.
Look what it says here. Saucy lifeguards flash rebellious nipples.
I got
That
overturned
is
in 30
hilarious.
1937.
That's hilarious. So is Tarzan, 1937, New York State's male shirtless ban. That's when they overturned it. The incident attracted press attention as Atlantic City and other waterfronts similarly mandated against man nips. With that legal domino tipped, along with the help of Hollywood hunks.
And you were talking about how Twitter has porn.
Yes.
Yo, we
lot.
got banned from Google Play for that. Twitter has it. They're up on Google Play.
Yeah, Twitter has a substantial amount of porn. You know, you follow like some of them gals, and they just want you to see, look, here's one in my pussy, right there. Take a look.
Like full blown.
Not offensive.
Well, it's not offensive if you follow them. I mean, if you follow certain porn stars.
I think
you know
it's
what you're
against
gonna
their
get.
own terms.
Oh, really?
But they're just allowing it because they know they want that traffic.
Oh, is that what it is?
You know they want that traffic.
Oh, you know they want that traffic, bro. Yeah, it's a problem if you hand your phone to your kid. You know, they accidentally click on that link and they're like, "Mommy, what's happening with her?"
But Jonathan Haidt or Height?
Height.
He was talking about an interesting thing where, you know, should there be an age where we really get into social media?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, people should be free to do what they want to do, but you know, the internet is the wilderness.
Well, his book, The Coddling of the American Mind, I'm in that right now. I just finished his other one, and I'm working on that one. And a lot of it has to do with social media, and a lot of it has to do with the impact that it has on young people. You know, people are not really designed for this. And you might be able to handle it if you're a 32-year-old man or a 35-year-old woman or whatever you are. But if you're a 15-year-old girl, it might be overwhelming. I mean, and the angst and the anxiety and, you know,
That's what I was saying about
yeah.
the depression. You know, they see if they're not at a party or their stuff's not getting liked, that has an impact on them. And ultimately, I think the networks need to be helping educate people how to, you know, whether it's disinfo, educate people how to research. I did see that YouTube is starting to do like a "you've been on this for too long" type thing.
Really?
Yeah.
They're like, get a life, you fuck.
Yeah.
They tell you that?
I want to build stuff like that. That's really important. Yeah. Helping people get off.
Yeah. I haven't seen that. I haven't done enough time on YouTube where they're kicking me off.
I have.
It's easy. You know, I sent Eddie Bravo this thing from The Guardian about the upsurge in people that believe in the flat Earth, and all of it because of YouTube videos. And that apparently now YouTube they want to censor those. They want to. They feel like flat Earth videos and I think another one. Check this if I'm wrong about this, but I think they also want to lean on those anti-vaccination videos. I think there's a concern with those. I think they're worried about a bunch of different things along those lines. You know, like they feel like there's disinformation and outright lies that are being spread. How do we combat it? We own this platform. What do we do? They feel like they have a responsibility.
I think there is responsibility. But
okay, but what is the responsibility if there's a debate?
I think it's more to educate people how to research, as opposed to saying this is or is not true.
Right.
Because who's deciding that?
Well, I believe the Earth is round, but I also believe it's such a stupid conspiracy that you should have it. You should be allowed, and it should be something you should show your friends. Like, dude, I need you to go look at this. This has 37,000 thumbs up. And they really believe that the fucking Earth is flat. They really believe there's an ice wall outside Antarctica. They really believe that the sky doesn't move. That we're in some sort of I think it's like projected images or something. Like there's a bunch of like really, really wacky theories. Like I think those are okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But I think freedom of information sort of transcends a lot of these little debates. So if there was more freedom of information, so we actually knew everything the government knew
Yeah.
about all of the different conspiracies and black projects, the black budget,
Yeah.
more information is going to give both sides the ability to understand what is happening.
That's true.
The reality is that we don't know what's happening, and there is lots of secret stuff.
The problem with that, though, is then you're dealing with foreign governments that are way better at keeping secrets than we are. And if they have access to our secrets, like one of the things that's been kind of disturbing is seeing the actual influence that these Russian troll farms have had on not just our political process, but sowing seeds of dissent amongst people and starting conflict amongst people and how people are buying into it. You know, like this podcast I've been talking about a lot with Sam Harris and Renee DiResta, that's her name, right? Where they talked about how these Russian troll farms set up a conflict by having a pro-Muslim rally across the street from a pro-Texas Pride rally. And they just set it all up and had it there, and then a skirmish broke out because these people are across the street from each other. And that they do this they were having these African-American groups that were saying anyone but Hillary, and they were going really trying to get people to vote for Jill Stein, really trying to get people to even consider Trump, but anyone but Hillary. And then they were also having like ones that were against them. They're trying to like make debate. They're trying to make anger. And
I don't think you can stop that.
But it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? That this is like a concerted effort.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, how do you feel about that
psychological
when
warfare.
you are, you're in a position where you have a fairly small network, but it's influential, right? And then so you're watching Zuckerberg and the Facebook shit on TV, and they're talking to these Congress people and senators, and they're talking to all these politicians about what's going on and how to stop it and what they're trying to do, and you feel like, oh God, like this is kind of an arena that I'm getting into. What would you do?
I mean, I think more conversation needs to happen, not less.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right.
I want more information. I want from the government, from the corporations,
From the trolls?
from the trolls. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I have a pretty good ability to discern what is and is not troll behavior. I think help people understand how to absorb information. Like
Yeah.
just banning an account that has an agenda is everyone has an agenda. It's a propaganda back and forth between everybody. I mean, just because somebody posts a Jill Stein meme, okay, what's your point? Like, their intention, okay, I'm not saying that, regime change behavior is positive or negative. I don't know how we sort of switch gears.
No, we did, but
yeah.
let me step in here. When you're saying a Jill Stein meme, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you posting a Jill Stein meme. Like, say if you have a joke about Jill Stein, you wanted to post it in a meme. There's nothing wrong with that. What's weird for people is that people are being hired to make these memes, and these memes may not have anything to do with their own personal ideology. They might just decide, hey, I'm going to collect this check, and they make, apparently according to Renee in this podcast she did with Sam Harris, they make really hilarious memes. Like some of them are really funny.
I listened to that podcast, yeah. It
was great,
She
right?
said that she started laughing a
Yeah,
couple times,
yeah. And she had to go through thousands and thousands of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
weird,
there's
right?
this idea of a web of trust, which is interesting. Sort of like a peer-to-peer. It's not like a Chinese social score, but it's like if the people that you're connected with show a certain account to be untrustworthy, then, because you trust your little network. So it's sort of like a peer-to-peer score. We're looking at different ideas. I think that transparency and understanding what's going on with different accounts and if it's the real person, that's all important stuff. We don't want frauds, we don't want disinfo, but we just have to really step back and think about how we're doing it rather than letting AI and algorithms run the show.
Right. I see what you're saying. Do you think that there's I don't want to say there's a market. Is there a demand for this? Like, are a lot of people responding in a positive way to the way you guys are approaching the game?
Yeah, for sure. Every time there's a big scandal, every time, whether it's data manipulation or our first big growth spurt was during the Snowden days when he released all the information.
Right.
And people are really upset with what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what are they supposed to do? Like, this is what they're using for their communication. It's
Right.
not easy to just achieve a multi-billion person network overnight so that everybody's there, and so we're stuck. But again, I think that supplementing, just installing these alternative apps, not just us, like the whole open source market. I'm not even here trying to just talk about what we're doing.
Right.
It's like, if you don't have those apps on your phone and you don't use those browsers, I'm sorry, you're not helping. And people just want to vote with their energy, I think, and vote with their time. So it's more of an education thing. People
Yeah.
just don't know that this matters and that this can help change the whole internet simply by logging into an app once in a while. It's like organic food. I mean, we want to put things into it. We want to support things that have integrity. So when you click something, you are supporting that thing. When you're sitting on an app all day, you are feeding that app. That's how the apps get all the money. That's where they get all their funding. That's where it's all based, is in user retention and energy.
And do you think that most people are even aware of this, or do you think they're just using it because it's convenient?
The biggest charade going on right now, most people don't know that Facebook owns Instagram. They think Instagram's like cool because, it's not Facebook.
Right. It's one giant umbrella.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the difference between the two? Obviously, with Instagram, it's just pictures mostly, and then whatever the post is below the pictures. But with Facebook, it's a lot more commentary and long, verbose statements on shit, and then people arguing in the comments about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All the Instagram founders left, abandoned ship. The WhatsApp founders abandoned ship. The Oculus founder abandoned ship, all because of the privacy stuff.
Really?
They're like, you took this good thing. Well, it was proprietary, so I would argue if it was ever actually a fully good thing. But at least it wasn't, completely corrupted by Facebook. But all of the founders of those companies left because they hate what's going on. The WhatsApp guy joined Signal, which is a really cool open source end-to-end encrypted messaging app.
Mm-hmm.
So, these people know
So what happened with WhatsApp? It's not the same anymore?
WhatsApp is owned by Facebook.
I don't know this.
Oh,
You're saying it like I know
yeah,
this.
sorry. Yeah.
Come on, bro. Get
Dude,
with the
get in
program.
the jungle, man.
Like, well, you're deep into this, man. That's why I want to talk to you
Yeah,
about it.
and they're all buying up companies and
And using these same sort of ideas.
yeah,
And-
now they're talking about integrating the messages between WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook, so it's all one system.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah. Centralization. It has happened?
Hasn't been turned on yet, but I believe it's happening. Like if you want to message
Jesus.
like your DMs on Instagram, you're gonna have to download the Facebook Messenger.